All right, let's get into it. Today, we're jumping into Chapter 9, Experimental Research and Levels of Evidence. This is all coming from the textbook Research Methods in the Real World, and we're basically going to figure out how scientists actually know if something is legit or not. So, imagine you're scrolling on your phone, and a headline just pops out at you. New study says coffee cures baldness. Or, something equally wild. We see this kind of stuff every single day. But the big question is, how do you sort through the crap to find what's real? That's what we're going to do right now. We're hunting for proof.
So to even begin this quest, we got to understand the two main ways researchers even start asking these questions. It really just comes down to one thing. Are we looking at a whole bunch of people, or are we zooming in on just one?
And that's the big split, right here. On one side, you've got group studies. These are all about finding the average, what works for most people most of the time. But then, on the other side, you've got single-subject studies, which put one single person under a microscope. Both are totally legit ways to do science, but they're answering fundamentally different questions. What's good for the crowd versus what's good for this one person?
Okay, so let's talk about the best of the best, the absolute gold standard. If you want to prove, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that your coffee baldness cure is the real deal, this is how you do it. This is what's called a true experimental design.
The whole thing hinges on one word, one superpower, randomization. This is the secret sauce, man. It means you take a bunch of people and you randomly, and I mean truly randomly, like flipping a coin, put them in either the coffee drinking group or a fake coffee group. By doing that, you magically get rid of so much bias. It's the best tool we have to make sure the groups are pretty much identical before you even start.
Okay, I know, this looks like some kind of secret code, but trust me, it's just a simple recipe. Let's decode it. R stands for randomization, what we just talked about. O is for observation. That's just a test you give them. And X, well, that's the treatment, the special sauce you're testing. So when you see ROXO, it just means you randomize your groups, you give them a pre-test, you give one group the treatment, and then you test everybody again. Boom, rock solid.
And what's cool is this code is flexible. You can use it to have a little showdown between two different treatments. Maybe X1 is your new fancy coffee cure, and X2 is the old boring stuff that's already on the market. You just randomize people into the two groups and see which X comes out on top.
But look, let's get real for a second. The world is a messy place. You can't always randomly assign kids in a school to different reading programs, right? That'd be chaos. So what happens when you can't do that perfect randomized experiment? Well, that's when you enter the world of quasi-experiments.
Notice that M at the very beginning of the code here? That one letter changes the whole game. It stands for non-equivalent, and it's basically a giant flashing warning sign that says, hey, we couldn't randomize these groups, and that means we have to be way, way more skeptical of the results, because those groups might have been different from the very beginning.
Yeah, and when you can't randomize, it's like leaving the front door unlocked. A whole bunch of problems can just walk right in. The book calls them threats to internal validity. Me, I call them the villains of the story. They're just these sneaky little things that can make it look like your treatment worked when it really didn't do a damn thing. And here's the rogues gallery, the 7 main villains. You've got history, that's when something else happens out in the world that messes with your study. Maturation, that's just people getting older or changing on their own. We've got stuff like your testing tools being wonky, or your groups being different from the start, that's selection, or even people just dropping out of your study, which is mortality. We're going to zoom in on a couple of the absolute sneakiest ones.
Okay, let's talk about statistical regression. This one will mess with your head. So imagine somebody has the worst day of their life and totally bombs a test, just gets a crazy low score. You put them in your special program, and next time, their score is better. Was it your program? Maybe. Or maybe they were just bound to do a little better anyway, just by pure luck. Because they couldn't possibly do that bad again. That natural drift back towards the average, that's statistical regression, and it has nothing to do with your treatment.
And then you've got the big boss, the final villain, selection. This is the biggest danger in any study where you can't randomize. It's the risk that your groups were just different from the jump, Maybe the people who volunteered for your coffee study were already healthier, or more optimistic, or something you didn't even think to measure. This right here, this is the exact villain that randomization was born to destroy. But let's rewind for a sec, back to that single subject idea. Just look at this chart, it's so clean. That first A section, that's the baseline, that's the person's normal performance. Then, in section B, you introduce the treatment and, holy crap, look at that, the performance just skyrockets. But here's the kicker.
To make sure it was really the treatment, you take it away again. That's the second A. And look, the performance drops right back down. For this one person, that's about as close to a smoking gun as you can get.
Okay, so we've been through a lot. The perfect experiment, the messy real-world ones. So now for the big payoff. How do we use all this to judge the studies we see every day?
Well, thankfully, we don't have to guess. There's a system, a hierarchy. Think of it like a power ranking for scientific proof. Not all studies get the same respect, and this scoreboard is how we tell the champions from the chumps.
Right at the tippy top of the pyramid, you have the absolute titans, a meta-analysis. That's where they take a bunch of other high-quality studies and combine all their data. It's the boss level of evidence. And just below that is our old friend, the randomized clinical trial, our perfect RXO experiment. If a study is one of these two, you need to take it seriously. This is the good stuff.
And here's the rest of the rankings. You can see our quasi-experiments. The messy ones, they're hanging out in the middle. Still useful, but you gotta be careful. And as you go further and further down the list, the proof gets weaker and weaker until you hit the very bottom. Expert opinion. Which, let's be honest, without any data, is just some smart person's guess.
So that's the deal. You've got the tools now. You know the secret code, you know who the villains are, and you've seen the scoreboard. So the next time you see one of those crazy headlines, you're not just going to believe it or ignore it, you're going to be able to ask the one question that really matters. Yeah, okay, but what kind of study was it?